So we have a great program for you today. This is a part of some programming that we did in Kansas City at the Kansas City Public Library. So they did this last night. How many hours of sleep did you get? Just a couple? Thanks for coming back. As you know, you will be hearing from our own museum curator, William Snyder, and our own supervisory archivist, Tim Rives, about what we're having coming up with our exhibits here on campus. This is a great sneak peek, if you will. You'll get to see some of the pictures before clearly the public's allowed in, so I hope you enjoy this. We had two handouts. One is a survey form. Our surveys are really important to us. It helps us build programming, build lectures and things like that you want and you need. If you would take a moment to fill that out, leave them on your tables or your chairs and somebody will pick them up later. And the other thing we handed out was this colorful piece of paper. This is a schedule of events for our D-Day week activities. I hope to see you on one of the days between the 1st and the 6th, maybe more than one. I'll be here. Hope you will be too. So without further ado, I don't know who's starting. Which one? Tim. That's why I asked. So first we'll hear from Tim Rives, our supervisory archivist and deputy director. Thank you.
Well, as Don said, William and I did this in Kansas City last night, and it was very informal then. It's going to be very informal today because our audience here knows so much about not only Ike, but also about what we do here at the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum, Boyhood Home. And this program we were calling The Road to Abilene, which is really a full circle, even though he had kind of that accident of birth in Denison, Texas. I'm sure they would love to hear that. He always considered Abilene home, and of course that's why he made so many decisions, the decisions he did make to place the library and the museum and everything here. And so the road to Abilene really went full circle from his boyhood to where we are today, right on the brink of reopening the museum, which has been comprehensively redesigned, and you'll all be amazed here before too long when you get to see it. Some brief history again, which you already may know. We're a lot different. There's 13 presidential libraries that are part of the National Archives system, from President Hoover up to President Bush 43. Most of them are one building that contains both the archives and the papers of the president and his museum. And we began so differently out here late during World War II, when Eisenhower had become a world-renowned figure. Some local folks formed the Eisenhower Foundation, who still to this day make things possible for us to do in terms of programs and exhibits. They wanted to find some way to honor not only Ike, but also all the local men and women who had served. When they were beginning to develop plans for maybe a monument of some sort, and also a small building where Eisenhower's awards and gifts could be displayed, and also the things that, again, the Abilenians who had served in the war could also exhibit those items. Mrs. Eisenhower died in September of 1946, and when the brothers came back to town for the funeral, they told the foundation that they would give them the Boyhood Home, which sits, of course, right next to it on its original location, which is one of our, I was just reminded, it's one of our biggest questions is the home on its original location, which it is. And so the home opened for tours in 1947. The foundation continued with their plans for a monument or a museum, and then broke ground for the museum building. And in fact, in 1952, when I came out to announce that he was running for president, he also dedicated the cornerstone of the museum building, which opened about 2 years later. And so only not even 2 years into Ike's presidency, he already had a museum, which of course at that time focused on his World War II military career. And while he was here, he told, again, the foundation, if a suitable building repository could be built in Abilene, I'll sit my papers there. At that time, the president could dispose of his papers however he wished. I could have given them to West Point, where he went to school, or Columbia University, where he was president, or Library of Congress, which has the papers of 23 presidents. But again, he chose Abilene. And so that building broke ground in 1959 and opened in 1962 and contains about currently 26 million pages of documents. Everything from Ike's pre-presidential papers to his papers as president, to his papers, very active 8 years as a former president, as well as the papers of about 450 of his political and military associates. And so now we have the home, we have the museum, we have the library. And the next question was, well, where's Ike going to be buried? And could have been buried at West Point, could have been buried at Arlington Cemetery. And once again, Ike chose to return to Abilene. And so the place of meditation was built in 1966. It opened. And Ike, along with his wife, Mamie, and their firstborn son, Dal, who died when he was about 3 years old, are here on the grounds. And then in 1975, this building was constructed, the Visitor Center and gift shop. And this is actually where Ike's grade school was located. Lincoln Elementary was here, right across the street from their house. The original Lincoln that Ike attended had been built over many years ago. Then that second, the school that replaced it is gone. But we are in a location where Ike would have sat in class, maybe having lunch exactly where we're having lunch today, who knows. But all this is really to say that, we've been at it here at Abilene now for more than 70 years in terms of telling stories about Ike and exhibiting items from his life, the Eisenhower family life. And so, exhibits become dated after a while. And even though the museum, has been redone, galleries have been redone over the years, it was time for it to be comprehensively redone. And a lot of that's because there's been so much more learned about Ike, especially since 1952, but even during the last major complete renovation in 1971, so when it reopened. So there's a new story to tell, and there's new ways to tell those stories, especially in terms of interactive exhibits and a lot more audiovisual records, and just the expectations that people have now when they visit a museum have changed since the time we first opened more than 60 years ago. And so thanks to the Eisenhower Foundation, the money was raised, a lot of money was raised, because museums are very expensive propositions. As William will tell you, so many things have to be custom made. In fact, all of our cases, the new cases were built in Belgium. And then the crew that came to install them are from Romania and Italy. Is that right? Yeah, so you can see it's a real international effort because these things are so specialized. The National Archives, while they pay for the museum and the archives and the staff here, they do not pay for the public programs we put on, such as the Big D-Day commemorative week that will start a week from Saturday, or the museum renovation. And so we are entirely reliant upon the Eisenhower Foundation for all their help, and more thankful than we can say. And so I think we'll start this kind of virtual tour through the museum. And it's changing daily. And I mean, it's really amazing to see. And so what you'll see today is a work in progress, and you'll hear more of my thinking about what went into just the ideas behind the new exhibits and some of the new features that you'll see. And so I think at this point, I'll turn it over to William to address more of those issues. So, but I'll stay here.
Okay, thanks, Tim. So, yes, I come from the very heart of America. Very famous Ike quote, particularly here in Abilene, that's what he was referring to. And from the start, about 5 years ago, we started this project. And from the very beginning, the group of folks who were involved, we decided we have such a wealth of information in those 26 million pages, direct from Ike and from Mamie, that we wanted to tell the exhibits as much as possible in their own words. So Ike and Mamie have a very definite presence throughout the museum and the new exhibits. Oh, here we go. Oh, last one we don't really need. But here's just a quick look at one of the artist renderings from the design firm. You heard our cases were made in Belgium. The design firm is from Chantilly, Virginia. We've been working with them from the beginning. So some of the things that you'll see throughout the museum are these large-scale photographs that sort of anchor specific topics All of these come from our, 98% of the images come from our collection, so that's exciting. We have, here are the quotes that we will see throughout. So there's a very definite way as you're walking through, you'll get used to seeing Ike and Mamie's own words because they're presented right here with these photographs. There's an additional photograph and a really wonderful quote about that particular period. Reading rails then throughout for more detailed information. And one of the things working with the design firm we talked about is that you always design a museum or an exhibit in a museum for the 3 types of museum visitors. Anybody know what those 3 types of people are called? It's kind of fun. Some runners, but that's not the term we use. Streakers, strollers, and scholars. The people who run through and maybe just look at the pretty pictures. Then you got the people who, oh, that picture interests me, but that doesn't, so I'll stand here and read a little bit more. And then your scholars who are going to read every single word. And we like them all. And it's presented in such a way that you can get, again, Ike and Mamie's story throughout these different layers of approach. And then this, just here at the bottom of the screen, we'll see a little bit more about this. This is one of these really awesome technology components. It's not directly interactive, but it is a custom animated video that was created just for us. It's World War II, a global war. And one of the things we discovered a few years back when we were doing our World War II anniversary exhibits is that everybody says World War II, right? But they don't really stop and think what that first word means. What does world mean? It is a global. The World War II impacted literally every single human being on the planet in some fashion or another. And what did that mean for the United States? We were fighting an existential war essentially on 2 fronts on entirely opposite sides of the globe. So what this animated projection does is shows a flat projection of the globe, and things like battle lines shift. The colors of the countries shift as they join the Allied or the Axis powers. There are major battles that pop up and they'll be identified briefly, and occasionally there'll be a bit of a video or a historic photograph from that battle. There's also sort of ambient sound throughout, so there'll be the battle sounds. You'll also hear a certain other president refer to a day that will live in infamy. You'll hear Winston Churchill's voice during the Battle of Britain when that is on the screen. And then at the very end, there are casualty figures show up on that screen. And excuse me, I'm not going to talk about it because I still get choked up even though we've been designing this for 4 years. But it's an amazing presentation and reminding everyone, particularly some of our younger visitors and our student visitors, what exactly the World War meant. Just real quick on the plan of the museum building. I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button. Let's see if we can go back. Never mind, plans are boring. Oh, there we go, okay. Our building was actually built in 3 phases over a 20-year period. So that first museum building that Tim was talking about is just the central core where the lobby is and the gallery going toward the Boyhood Home. Boyhood Home is over here on this side of the building. Immediately after the election and the dedication, another wing was added to the front. And then in preparation after Ike passed away for the large additional influx of collection materials that we received, that's when the entire back half of the building was added and completed in '71. For the first time connecting the 2 galleries across the front. And that was the last time that all of the exhibits were redone at one time. There were many updates throughout the years, as most of you probably know. But again, almost 50 years since a comprehensive overall renovation to the building. So this is very exciting. So new lobby desk, which is important. I'm going to show you a cute detail from that in just a moment. Believe it or not, we really, especially I think museum curators really get into these little details, so bear with me. First gallery, I come from the heart of America, and this is all about his Abilene years, and right there in the center, we recreated as best we could from Milton, Ike's youngest brother's description of their family kitchen table, a big old trestle table that they used to gather around. Very low tech, but very special. This is how the family's being presented. Everybody gets their own placemat on the table. So mom, dad, and 6 boys are there, and that's how we are introduced to the Eisenhower family. But the theme of the table continues in many cases throughout the exhibit, and we'll see that in just a minute. The second gallery is Becoming Ike and Mamie. So on this side is Ike's early military career, and on this side we really get very introduced to Mamie. And that's one of the things we really wanted to work on, was making sure that Mamie was included more thoroughly throughout the exhibit. So this is all about Mamie and her family and how they influenced Ike in his career. The table again occurs here. This is our first interactive table, and we'll see a couple pictures of it being installed. This is all about Ike's various military postings. What was he learning? Who was he working with? Who were his mentors? Where in the world were they? Was Mamie with him? What was Mamie doing? All that kind of information that would just take up walls and walls and walls and walls if we tried to put it into an exhibit. But folks can choose to interact with that if they wish. The next gallery, this is the wall we were just looking at with the details before, and a bit of that round table where World War II, a global war, is going to be displayed. So this is prepping our beginnings into World War II and Ike's rise to leadership. This gallery back here is our leading to victory, so all about D-Day, and again, from Ike's point of view, the plans going into it, what was going on. Here's the inspiration in many ways for the theme of our table. As many of you know, we have the D-Day planning table in our collection. So the table that Ike and his generals and advisors sat around to do all of the plans for the D-Day invasion. It has been nearly 70 years since that has been displayed in its entirety for any length of time. It's a huge table, it's also almost 14 feet long, and we have 10 of the original 12 chairs that sat around that table. So just think about the decisions that were made at that table. Surprisingly, there aren't any coffee cup rings or cigarette burns on the top of the table, which I'm very happy about. Surprised, but very happy, because actually the table has an unknown history. We do know it is from about 1800 and a Sheraton-style mahogany table. The chairs are Chippendale from about 1750. So these things are antiques when Ike and his generals are using them at that time. So what are the other stories that this table could tell? I wish we knew. Then we have what we're calling our Oz moment, and things change as we go into the election period, and then the rest of the museum is dedicated to the presidency. This wonderful space here is the Mamie Gallery, so she still has a space just to herself, even though she's included throughout. And then again, something I'm super excited about, this entire wing here is our temporary gallery space, so almost 4,000 square feet of temporary exhibit space. And laid out in such a way that we can even do 2 temporary exhibits at the same time if we need to, that sort of thing. So it's going to be really exciting for us, and I hope for you all to come and see our changing exhibits. There we go. LED lighting, also something we curators get really, really excited about. How to best present our collection and preserve them at the same time. As many of you are probably aware, light fades things, right? Light is one of the most damaging things to artifacts in a museum. Right now, LED is the best way to showcase artifacts, as well as provide some specialty theater-style lighting on the exhibit panels. So there's definitely going to be a wonderful play of light throughout, including some ambient mood lighting. But this is really super high-tech. And another really nice thing about it, it uses less than 1/10 of the electricity we used to use and doesn't produce any heat. So we're not battling to try and maintain the temperature in the gallery as well, just because the lights are on. Great picture of a ladder, isn't it? Not an artifact, well, maybe in a few years, but one of the things, this is one of the original walls to one of the original buildings that was uncovered during the rip back to the studs renovation. And this occurs right at the very end, and something we wanted to preserve and kind of showcase a little bit about the history of the building itself. It kind of appears a little bit. So remember we talked about there's going to be those Ike and Mamie quotes throughout. The very last quote you're going to see from Ike will be in raised brass letters on this original stone wall. So just kind of a neat little touch that we wanted to include. Remember that new reception desk I mentioned in our lobby, custom designed for us? Those of you who have visited before may recognize these. These are the balustrades from the handrail that used to be at the top of the lower military gallery, where all the large weapons and tanks were. So we saved those pieces from the original building, and they were repurposed as a design element into the new desk. Something else preserved, all that wonderful walnut paneling throughout the building has been restored. So it was kept and referenced. Okay, any idea what this young lady's doing? Oh, who remembers Mousetrap? I love that game. That's a great game. No, but yes, she actually is painting, and it does look like Mousetrap contraptions. What she is painting are the new custom designed artifact mounts, and just a handful of them. So every single artifact that will be displayed in our wonderful new cases from Belgium is getting its very own custom made mount. They are made, all of these mounts are made out of appropriate materials. They are painted to match the cases with low VOC paints and other things so we can't have off-gassing in the cases that can damage the artifacts. Also, each one of these little brackets that's holding something gets its very own particular kind of lining so that that metal or that paint is not directly touching the artifact, and that lining changes depending upon what the artifact is made of that it's holding. So all very detailed, amazing work. So that's just another one of the companies. They were here for 6 weeks just making the artifacts. They were here back in November, and we had to pull everything out that was going in, and they had to pattern all of that. So many of these started their life in, where are they from? West Virginia. Some of these artifacts started in West Virginia, and the rest of them were finished and made here. So again, very much a global effort. So that original artist rendering we started with, this is that wall in process of being installed. We still don't have carpet yet, but these walls went in, the murals went on. Here's that reading rail structure being installed. Again, custom made for us in Nashville. There's the panels for the reading rail. I know this is exciting stuff, right? Okay, sorry, I did not put this PowerPoint together. I would not have included myself in that. Yeah, there I am standing. You can see, but you can kind of guess at how big a floor space that hasn't been carpeted. Remember the D-Day table being displayed in its entirety? This is the case, or the footprint of the case, where that table is going to be displayed. And there's Dawn, thank you.
You gotta check these before.
I know. Samantha is never allowed to put the PowerPoint together again. Dawn is standing just behind where I was, and this is the floor of the case. This is the structure going in for where the D-Day table will be sitting right about here. There's the glass going up. I know, I'm sorry, we get really excited. Like I said, we get really excited about this stuff. But you can see the slots up here. This is where the LED lighting inside the case is going to be. These are, you should see the hinges for these things. They are the most amazing piece of engineering. Because those glass panes weigh 500 pounds or something, but they swing open beautifully and smoothly on two hinges. It's amazing. The slots in the floor, something else we get to provide now inside the cases. You know those little packs of silica that say "do not eat" when you get a new pair of shoes or something like that? I call it genetic engineering, although silica is obviously not a live, living creature, but genetically engineered silica is available for museums so that you can get it designed to be a specific humidity control level at all times. We're required to maintain 45% relative humidity within the museum and within the cases. So these little slots are right above drawers that we will fill with 45% relative humidity silica gel. If something gets a little too damp, like it might rain for 5 weeks, the silica gel will soak that up and maintain 45% humidity in the case. If it starts to get too dry, it will release enough of that moisture it had sucked up until it's back to 45% relative humidity. This is stunning stuff. It is absolutely amazing and state-of-the-art. Very, very cool. We're buying 400 cassettes about the size of a loaf of bread. And depending upon the volume within the case is how many of those cassettes go in these little drawers. So very scientific stuff. This is actually looking through the D-Day case at some of the mood lighting and things of that nature. But one of the things we also worked on is that you will always be able to see the next step in your visit when you walk through the museum. You can see a glimpse into the next gallery. It might be through a case, but there's still that visibility so you know where to go. Lots of folks don't like to get lost in museums. I kind of do, because you never know what you're going to find. But lots of folks feel uncomfortable. Again, another large mural. Love this. It's a little hard to see, but this is in the D-Day, planning for the D-Day gallery. This is a port in England, and every single thing you can see is something that is somehow going across the channel. Planes, trains, automobiles, it's all here. It's just an absolutely amazing industrial undertaking. If we can advance, there we go. So, D-Day. We've seen a couple interactives that we have, a little video projection. This is our first theater experience. So here's a custom-made video for us. And again, Ike, in Ike's own words, is telling us about the planning for D-Day. And you'll have a chance to sit down and view this. I think it's ended up about 8 minutes long, if I remember correctly. It's been through several cuts. But it's an absolutely multi-projection presentation of historic imagery, historic films, Ike's voice in a recording. It's absolutely amazing. And keep this sort of blank space that you absolutely cannot see in this slide in your head for just a moment. Shoot, let me go back. Because, didn't we have a slide in here last night about that? Anyway, one of the awesome artifacts we have, which you probably remember that was in the military gallery before, is our model of the Mulberry Harbor, the artificial harbors that were created on the D-Day beaches. So that if the invasion were successful, the large supply ships of that previous picture with all those things that had to get across the channel could be offloaded and supplied. So as the invasion force moved forward into France, they could be supplied from the rear. The sea was too shallow to offload the supply ships. So what do? You do something that's never been done before. You come up with a plan to build a floating dock and pier and harbor so that you can offload all of that equipment. Part of that information will be shared in the video, the tens of thousands of trucks and all of that, those sorts of figures. But when it gets to the point in the video where they're specifically talking about the Mulberry Harbor, the lights will come up in the case, show off the model of the Mulberry Harbor, and then fade back to black as the video continues. So it's going to be a really, I think, hopefully kind of a tug at the heartstrings kind of moment. But then as the video ends, the lights will come up in the case again, and you can go look at it a little bit more if you'd like.
William,
Yes?
can you tell them about the new media pieces that are in that film from the National Archives?
Oh, which ones are the new ones that are in that one? I've forgotten. Thank you.
I'll do it.
Everybody listen to Dawn.
For that film, Tim and some other people went to the National Archives in DC and found new film from D-Day that we have never used or seen before that's in that film. So it's the first time that we'll collectively as a community get to see some of this stuff.
Thank you, Dawn. I forgot that had been included.
It was a big deal.
I only care about the artifacts, right? The video I don't care about. It's all about the artifacts. Again, sorry about the inclusion of yours truly in here, but there's a few more in the mounts and some of their tools that they brought with them from West Virginia. Exciting stuff, right? You'll notice the colors have changed. We are now in the presidency, or the running for the presidency, and here, since Everybody asks for it. Here is your selfie moment with Ike and Mamie. So everybody, please take your photograph there with Ike and Mamie, and make sure you tag us when you post it. But they are life-size, and this is such a cute photograph. It is on the South Lawn of the White House, and this is on their first wedding anniversary as president and first lady. So it's a great photo. But we've changed colors. We're talking about the presidency. This is a case that was right where those tools were sitting. So this is all about all that wonderful I Like Ike stuff that we have. All the campaign materials will be going in here. Ike and Mamie are covered up for safety so that they don't get damaged while everything else is being installed. And come on. Okay, I was going to wait until we got there, but since we're talking about new video, remember back to the Becoming Ike and Mamie gallery where we're talking about where they meet and then where Ike's early military career and all about their postings? That interactive table that's in there where you can really delve into the history. One of the things that's going to be added, or included, I should say, in that some rare footage that has just been digitized of Eisenhower family home movies from the 1920s. So we've got some great pictures of their son John as this little kid. They're just absolutely awesome. Thank you, Pam. So again, more of the cases being installed right there at the beginning of the presidency. Oh, there's the interactive table I was just talking about. So that's where you'll be able to watch those wonderful little snippets of Eisenhower family movies. And this is the Becoming Ike and Mamie Interactive. So what's really cool about this is you can search through this in any number of ways. You can just click sort of by geography. You can click by topics. It's a little hard to see, but what was Ike learning? Leadership skills, diplomacy skills, things of that nature. So you can search by that, or you can slide the timeline across. And all of these things will change depending upon where Ike was in that 5 or 10 year period that you're searching for. And then as you click on one of those buttons, this will pop up. And so when Ike was in the Philippines with his good buddy General MacArthur, and what he was learning from or what not to do from MacArthur, you'll also be able to click through any number of photographs of Ike's time, or Ike and Mamie, and in this case, John, their time in the Philippines. There's that big round table, that the projection of World War II, a global war, and there's the map. So we have the date counter at the bottom. This is sort of a little clock counter that helps you kind of track the motion of time, and you can start to see how countries' colors are changing or where they were aligned. In this case, not really at the start of the war, but this is already right at the very beginning. We've got Japan, their control area of the Pacific, and their invasion of China. So this is at the very start of the war. And there we are again, so sorry. Mamie Gallery. So these are just some of the cases in the Mamie Gallery. So very excited. We have lots of great room to really show off all things Mamie, including one of the designs we came up with the mount makers. We're going to have a waterfall of hats, is kind of how we're talking about it. So there'll be a nice big stack of sort of hats just floating in space, along with some of her shoes and handbags and all those wonderful accessories. How many hats do we have of Mamie's in the collection? Somebody's already heard this because I recognize some faces who were here a couple of weeks ago, but we have 114 hats of Mamie's in the collection. We have more shoes than that. I don't know how many shoes we have, but we have more shoes. What's nice about, again, these cases are going to help us preserve the collection. But Mamie's clothing, or most textiles, but we'll use Mamie as a really good example, can be on display for 1 year, and then it must rest for 10 years before it can be on display again. So we're very fortunate that we have such a huge collection of Mamie's stuff that we can load up these cases. Mamie, and I'm sure many of you have seen, remember we had that video running in the Mamie Gallery before? We have a brand new and kind of updated version. And one of my favorite parts was we have a snippet of an interview that Mamie gave 3 weeks before her death to Barbara Walters. And Barbara asks at one point, Mamie, how would you like people to remember your husband? And Mamie gives a really tearful and heartfelt response to that, which I'm not going to try and repeat because I can't get through it. And then Barbara asks, how would you like people to remember Mrs. Eisenhower? And she laughs and says, I never even thought of such a thing. And she said, as just a good friend. So we took that as the theme for the Mamie Gallery. It's Mamie in her own words about what she did to be a good friend. To Ike, to their family, to other friends, to people she didn't know. She was a really great friend. That was her goal in life, I think. And so the video is really wonderful and really tells a lot of what we don't know about Mamie, necessarily about how she supported all kinds of various causes, how she worked so hard for Ike and their career. It was a partnership. It's just a really amazing story and really gives confidence into Mamie as a full and complete individual. In the presidency area, we talk quite a bit about the Cold War. This is a great interactive, but it's actually mounted vertically, as you can see. This is well over 8 feet tall to the top. You interact with the touch screen here. And what's going to be really good about this, for school groups, tour groups, things of that nature, a docent or a guide or the teacher can interact with here and then actually throw the image to the top of the screen so that students standing in the back of the group can see what they're talking about. Really unique approach to this, and we really have to thank our design firm for coming up with this concept. Cases for the presidency, I want to get to another cool theater experience. This is so awesome and really under construction, so it's a little hard to see. There will be benches out here in front. This is the Peace Theater. So we're in the section of the Presidential Gallery called Waging Peace. Again, using Ike and Ike's own words to describe that. And this will show three-minute snippets from 3 of Ike's speeches on peace. And so again, you hear Ike in his own words talking about the chance for peace, atoms for peace, and 3 imperatives of peace, which we're putting in quotes because that's not the exact title of that speech, but it works really well for our group of 3. And so you get to hear Ike, but there will also be these really wonderful images on the screen from the period. So right next to you is a whole discussion of the Cold War. You saw the Cold War interactive. What was the Cold War? I think we kind of have to tell many people these days. And so there are these really wonderful images of Ike and life in general. Atoms for Peace, one of the first nuclear power stations. What are some of the peaceful uses for nuclear power that aren't for warfare? Very big on Ike's mind. Random picture of stuff that every once in a while shows up from Nashville. We have been having trucks back into the museum practically on a daily basis and offloading just all kinds of stuff that fortunately the exhibit fabricators and installers know what they are. I have absolutely no idea. And we'll just use it when it's all put together. Another awesome mural, Tim spoke about our history. The scan of this mural actually came from the back of the program for the dedication when the library building was built. You'll see that 4th Street still runs through the campus. Right there's the boyhood home. And if you can see over here, the museum is just the first 2 galleries. So it's definitely before 71 when the back half was added. But this is just a discussion for our visitors about the importance of the relationship between the National Archives and the Foundation. Really, I hope everybody taking away the impression that without the foundations that support each presidential library, things like this wouldn't happen. They couldn't happen. Here at the tail end of the presidency, can you see the portrait there? So it's Ike saying goodbye to us. This is made up of the complete text of his famous farewell address. So it's a really wonderful moment, and the case will display some last-minute items, if you will, from the presidency, including some of the drafts. How many do we have, Tim? We have about 30 drafts of the farewell address. And we know there were probably more, but that's what we have in the collection. So, and there's a little glimpse of our final theater experience. where, I hope I didn't lock this up again, benches will be added here. And so you've been through the whole museum, you've heard about Ike and Mamie and their lives, and here, once again, Ike is saying goodbye to us, but his legacy is in our hands. There's some really wonderful quotes from Ike, some very specific topics that he wants us to think about as he spoke to the future generations. And then there's that wall, and I am not giving the final quote away. You have to come back and see where the final quote will be on the wall. So, and as he said, just another average Abilene family. In that big new temporary gallery we've got, so a little flash ahead to our first exhibit that we're going to have. This is super exciting. We have been working with a Hotel des Invalides, a museum in Paris. They are putting together a 75th anniversary exhibit for the liberation of Paris, and we've been working with them. They wanted to concentrate on these two gentlemen, General Eisenhower, of course, and General Charles de Gaulle. So we're affectionately calling it the Ike and Charlie Show. Don't you dare say I said that. But what's super cool about it, they're using images from our collection, from their collection of Charles de Gaulle, and really remarkable parallels between these two gentlemen. Both from relatively poor families in relatively rural areas. They both went to their country's military academies, both from fairly religious backgrounds, both rise fairly high, both in their country's military and in their country's political arenas. And it will be presented as a bilingual exhibit. It will be in French and English, both in Paris and here. So this will be our first temporary exhibit in our temporary gallery when the museum opens. So there is a sneak peek and a little bit of behind the scenes of how we do things, why we do things, and how much fun we have on these really nerdy little bits and pieces of what it takes to put an exhibit together. But thank you all for listening, and we would love to have any questions.
I was just going to make a comment. I was in Lubbock, Texas, 1st of January, and went to the Silent Wings Museum. It was totally, totally awesome, and the only one in the world.
Thank you for the share. Yes, we love to promote our museum and other museums too, so thank you. Any other questions?
I got one.
Oh, good. Hang on. I should stand back here.
You talked about the textiles only being allowed 1 out of 10 years, and the question would be why?
Good question. Preservation. Of course. It's really, again, back to the issue of how much light exposure something has. Certainly the best way to preserve just about anything, regardless of what it's made of, is to lock it up in a hermetically sealed environment with absolutely no light, and never sees the light of day again. Then the question becomes, if nobody ever gets to see it, does it lose its meaning, right? And they very well could. So what I've always thought in my head about the sort of duality of our job is the difference between presentation and preservation. How do we do both at the same time? And it's things like, okay, we know that a textile, and even different kinds of textiles, will last without fading or with minimal fading under certain type of light for a certain length of time. We are extremely fortunate that our entire building is climate controlled, so not just the individual cases, not just the storage rooms. So it's not a huge shock for our materials to move from storage to display. So that's good. That really helps us out tremendously. Not all museums are so lucky. But then we do track things about how long is something under light? How long has it been on display? Likewise, depending on things like Mamie's dresses and the mounts that are being custom made and custom sized for her clothing, is the stress that's put on them depending upon, is it a strapless gown that's cinched at the waist? So do we support everything here, or do we support it here? And again, those mount makers, those professionals were amazing to watch as they analyzed all these different artifacts. So whether it was, made me stress whether it was some sort of weapon from World War II that has weird attachments to it that still has to be floating in space in the back of a case. How do you balance that so that, like, when the train goes by, it doesn't fall off? So all sorts of things that we have to think about, but it's really for preservation, and that's one of the standards that we try to follow for textiles.
Do the same for the uniforms?
If we certainly have something else to go with it, Mamie is where we have the depth in our collection. We do rotate uniforms. We actually, as a matter of fact, we've had 2 recent donations come in. One from a husband and wife team that, because he was a shot down pilot that went into the Army Secret Service, and she was the nurse who took care of him after he got shot down. They kept their marriage a secret, but they never had any kids, and they just donated their entire collection of their letters, their uniforms. It's so cool. So we've got that, and we just got yesterday from a woman in Lawrence. We don't have all the details on the family, but we got 2 beautiful West Point cadet uniforms. The dress and the slightly less dress. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. I have a question for Mr. Rives, please.
Yes, please. So you don't have to keep us up.
Could Mr. Rives tell us about how the development of the exhibit, like the content, was created? The words within the exhibit, how was all of that done?
I was just thinking along similar lines, Don. Well, seriously, just in terms, you have this new museum and everything that went on behind it, bring it to fruition. And the planning started 5 years ago or more with Meredith and the foundation and library staff and other foundation staff members. And so at first you're just deciding what story are you going to tell? And what elements are you going to emphasize? And so a lot of it was just about the different steps that Ike and Mamie took during their life together that resulted in him being the Supreme Allied Commander and the President of the United States. So preparing for a purposeful life was one of their guiding principles. And so you're looking at Ike's decision to go to one of the service academies. And so that step at West Point, and then his early assignments and meeting Mamie and them forming this partnership to advance their careers, they called it, because especially at that time, her career really was her husband's career. And those important assignments in Panama, and then in Washington, and then in Paris with the American Battle Monuments Commission, but just showing how all those successive steps resulted in those 2. We have a really unique but good problem at our presidential library because Ike had 2 outstanding careers, one as a soldier and one as a statesman. So the story we tell here is a little different than any other presidential library. And I think one example of that is the big attraction at a lot of presidential libraries is the Oval Office replica. And I think our Oval Office here is really that D-Day planning table because it was really D-Day that was most responsible. I think the success of that invasion of Ike then going on to become president and winning the acclaim that he did. And so the thinking went way back to just, what are the real essential elements of the Eisenhower story? How can we best represent those not only in words, but in artifacts and in images, and how should the best way for people to interact with those images, which make it what's the way to make it most immediate and thought-provoking in their minds. So that's some of the behind kind of the backstory to the museum as well. But again, it's just been this incredible effort of all those different considerations of what's it going to look like, what's going to be in there, and what are the thoughts behind what you're going to see. And so I hope it all comes together to your satisfaction when you get to see it here in just a few weeks. But I guess we're saying there's more than meets the eye when you put one of these big projects together. An awful lot of people made it happen, and an awful lot of donors made it happen.
Just to tag on to that real quick, the other members of the design team, as we kept calling ourselves, as Tim mentioned, foundation members, library staff members, we were so fortunate we had Eisenhower family members on the committee. We also had a couple of people on the committee whose parents had worked for Ike or in the administration, and so they had their own memories of Ike and Mamie's children and what their parents went through when they were working for Ike and Mamie. So it was, again, Ike and Mamie in their own words, but everybody had a personal connection to them, it seemed like, in that way. And it was just such a wonderful collegial working group for 5 years. It was amazing.
And then we also had a team of professional historians, who would review everything that we thought we needed to tell the story and to check us, for objectivity and just to make sure that we were accurate in our storytelling. That's an important point in a history museum. So again, just an awful lot of people contributed, and I think it's going to be great.
Absolutely. We had one more question, and April.
I'll yell it out. Are you going to encourage or discourage photography through the museum? I know there's that one spot for photography.
Good. I didn't mean to imply that there wasn't any place else. One of the things that's nice is that we encourage photography everywhere in the museum. So just no flash, please. Because again, flash particularly added onto it. If everybody took a flash picture of Mamie's wedding dress, it would be just as bad as sticking it out in the sunlight, so that, light is bad, right? People have a question.
Okay, you talked about having streakers and scholars. Have you timed the average person to get through the museum? So like if we're bringing guests, how much time should we allow? And how much different is it from the old museum? What was the average time that people went through it before? Did you know?
Good question. It is one of those things that, again, certain parts of the museum industry really get into. Like highlight cases, other people like to analyze traffic flow and all. There's a really high-tech, scientific way that museums determine what's the most popular exhibit or portion of or artifact on display. How many nose prints are on the case? That's what we go around and count nose prints before the cleaning crew comes in. That's what we do. Actually, the old museum, it was we'd have people who would run through in 30 minutes because they were on their way to Truman and they had to get there before it closed. So they stopped and, we got the short end of the deal. Or we had lots of people who would spend the whole 8 hours that we were open and come back the next day. So it's really all over the place. Probably our average, without stretching it, was 2 to 3 hours, which is fairly substantial. I think, again, for streakers, strollers, and scholars, we can unfortunately have, if those people really want to run through in 30 minutes, they can run through in 30 minutes. But I think if, you could, again, like I was talking about, you could read sort of the quotes and look at a couple of the artifacts that really grab your eye, and maybe watch 1 or 2 of the videos or play with one of the interactives, and get, a certain kind of basic level across the board Ike's life. You can spend a little bit more time and read a little bit more, watch all of the videos, maybe be out hour and a half. Please read some of the artifact labels while you're here. But if you're going to do that, then maybe it is probably about what we were expecting, 2 to 3 hours as we had with most of our visitors throughout the old museum. But really good question. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, if you had one book to recommend to read about Dwight Eisenhower's life, what would it be?
We agree on this one.
I mean, there's so many, and they come out all the time. They're coming out more and more frequently because Ike's reputation keeps rising. But we all really like At Ease, which is an informal memoir that he wrote very late in his life, in which I'm sure we have a lot of sales somewhere in this building. But it's very anecdotal. It's an easy read, and he covers almost every time period in his life. I think it's a really good place to start, a fun place to start.
So what about for children and 11 as well? Is there
We do have someone, I think, who can.
Yeah, we do have several books, and our Director of Lifelong Learning is coming to tell us which books she thinks are the best for kids.
Just being published, well, actually, some came out last month.
So just last month, Cobblestones magazine, I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, they just released a new updated
Eisenhower issue, and we hope to have it for sale here shortly. We're working on that. But it's great for that 5th grade to 8th grade. Lots of good activities too, but we contributed to that information so we know it's accurate.
Yes.
I can shut this up.
Okay, shut it.
How about the funding for all of this and how much is it costing?
And has Meredith already left us? Okay, again, it's all foundation funded, so all privately raised. I think we started with a goal of trying to do all of this for a little over $8 million. By the time we were finished, it was around 12.5 million. But some of that money that the foundation is raising is also going into a separate fund for programming, so that we can encourage more school groups to come. We'll have new activities for them, all of that sort of thing. So, good question. Yes, sir?
Can you address how much energies are going into marketing the opening of the new museum to the world?
Quite a bit. Quite a bit. The problem is, of course, we had that specific target date which got delayed. And since we don't have a specific target date for opening, we'll be a little subtle in terms of our opening right now. But marketing is being pushed. Samantha's been working on it for over a year in terms of, hey, coming soon, hey, that sort of thing. But it is going out worldwide. And we do a lot with social media push, which we have many followers. So hopefully that works. And when we do have a specific target date in mind, be prepared for a media blitz. Yeah, I think you had a question.
First one, are the military vehicles and artillery going to be displayed in there still like they were?
Go ahead with your second question.
And the second question was, how long does it take to put a display into those boxes? I mean, it didn't look like you had any of those in yet. Is that correct?
Okay. Military vehicles, other than the Ike's Cadillac staff car, which we know was used by him, military vehicles will not be back. They have found a new home. It's called deaccessioning when a museum gets rid of something, and since we are a government entity, we can't just give those away or sell them. They are transferred to another federal museum. So remember the Jeep that we had? That actually was restored by mechanics at Fort Riley before it was donated to us. That Jeep has gone back to Fort Riley, so it's gone home. And they are currently renovating their museum, so it's perfect timing, and that worked out really well. In terms of installation, the mount making company that you saw, Rachel busily painting those mounts, will be coming back mid-June, and we will frantically spend 6 weeks with 6 or 8 of their staff and the 3 museum staff installing the bajillion artifacts throughout the cases. So it will be a very hectic but very safe 6-week period of loading the cases. So, good question. Thank you, Val. I like that question. That's good. Any more questions? All right. Well, thank you all very much for coming. Hope you enjoyed it.